On today's video, we're going to put some line on a spinning reel and we're going to pass on the line twists. Hey there outdoor YouTubers, it's Dave Knetter from Knetter's Practical Outdoors. And you know, before you even get started putting line on your spinning reel, you want to make sure you have enough line to properly fill that spinning reel. And the easiest way to figure that out is to just check the line capacity rating on the spool of your spinning reel. You know, it'll be stamped somewhere on here. You know, it's right here on this one, right on the skirt. And this will tell you how much line of what particular pound test it takes to fill this spool up properly. So here's the line capacity for this particular spool. As you can see, if you go a 6-pound test, it fits 150 yards, 10-pound test, it fits 100 yards, and so on. And generally speaking, that line capacity is going to be based on the diameter of monofilament. And I'll show you what I mean here. Here's some Trilene XT, 8-pound test, and the average diameter is 0.3 millimeters. You know, so you can equate that to the stamp that's put on your spool, whatever spool you're spooling up. But if you were to go with some of these fusion type lines like fire line or spider wire, as you can see, this is 20-pound test, but the diameter equivalent is actually 8-pound test mono. As you can see, the diameter of this line is also 0.3 millimeters, just like our mono is of a lesser pound test. So it's just something to keep in mind. If you're using mono, it should be really close to what's stamped on your spool. But if you're going to use some of these low diameter super lines, you're going to want to kind of double check the actual monofilament equivalent diameter. So now that we know we've got enough line to properly fill this spinning reel, we can go ahead and get started. And you know, for this demonstration I took the top half of the rod off. Just going to make life a little easier for us. And also for this demonstration, I'm going to be using this black Dacron tip-up line. It'll just be a little bit easier to see. But then the next step will be to determine which direction the line comes off of this spool. You know, we want this spool to face this spool. You know what I mean? You don't want it to come off like this. You don't want to stick that pencil through here and wind it off like this. You're going to want it to come off. Spool to spool are going to be facing each other. So we're going to want to determine which direction it's coming off of here. And depending on the direction, we may have to flip this over because we want the line to come off of this spool in the same direction it's getting wound on to this one. As you can see, the line comes off this spool from this side counterclockwise. So I'm just going to put an arrow on there to show that. So now we know which direction the line comes off of this spool. I'm going to want to take some off. And I'm just going to run it through this first guide. And then we can go ahead and tie it to the spool of the spinning reel. Okay guys, all we're going to want to do is tie a little knot in the end of this line. Just like that. And then we're going to try to turn this into kind of a slip knot noose. We're just going to go over itself, back through, like that. Then we're just going to kind of pull this down tight. There, and that just kind of gives us our slip knot noose type thing here. And then all we need to do is wrap that around our spool, open bail, pull it down tight, and then you would just cut this tag end off and you're all set, ready to go. So now that we've got the line attached to our spinning reel, we can kind of get started cranking it on. And remember, we want this line to come off this filler spool the same direction that our bail is spinning, the same way it would go onto this spool. So I think for me, about the easiest way to do that is just kind of point the reel right down at the spool it's coming off of. And you turn the crank and you see which way the bail spins. And we've got our arrow marked on here, and that's the same direction the line is coming off. So we know we're good to go, right? If it was the opposite, you'd want to take this spool and flip it over. And that's all you'd have to do. You know, if it's spinning the opposite way, you just flip the spool over. But we've got it set up right here. If you can imagine that line coming off of your filler spool like this, you want that bail to be spinning the same way, just like this, so they're spinning together. You know, think about it. If it was coming off of the spool like this, and your bail was spinning this way, right? You can kind of imagine your line would be twisting. So, anyways, easiest way I found is just point this right down at it. And if you're looking right from the top, your bail should be spinning the same way the line is coming off the spool. So, we got that all set up. So all I want to do right now, I'm just going to pinch the line between my fingers, and I'm just going to kind of get cranking it on. And of course, I really don't want to put this tip-up line on this spinning reel. Again, it's just for the demonstration. So I'm going to go ahead and do up some monofilament on another pole, and I'll show you that. Okay, it's kind of the same thing we got going on here. I marked right on my spool the direction the line's coming off. You know, the direction that it's coming off of here matches the direction my bail is spinning. So I'm kind of all set to go. And I'm going to do it the same way. Just going to kind of pinch the line between my fingers, and I'm just going to start reeling. You want to keep just a nice steady pressure on the line as it's going on. And if you stop and you check it out and there's no twists, you know, accumulating, you know you got it right. If for some reason you got a little confused and maybe you got a bunch of twists starting, flip that spool over, you know, and that'll probably take care of it. Now, you don't want to overfill the spool. That can be bad. And you also don't want to underfill the spool. You underfill it, you're going to sacrifice distance on your cast. You overfill the spool, a lot of times the line's going to kind of come puking off when you don't want it to. So, kind of the rule of thumb a lot of guys go with is maybe 1/8 of an inch from the edge lip of the spool. I think this one looks pretty darn good. I think that's just perfect. You know, a couple other thoughts on putting line on spinning reels is if you're going to attach any kind of a non-stretch line, you know, anything that, you know, basically probably isn't mono, you know, like a fire line or spider wire, if you're going to attach that directly to your spool, sometimes because that it's a non-stretch line, it won't really grab on that spool very well. And even after you get the whole thing filled up, like I say with spider wire or fire line, the whole amount of line will actually spin on the spool itself. So what I like to do is just take a piece of tape and, you know, right after I get the knot tied on the spool, and just take that piece of tape and put it right over the knot. And that's just enough grab so that after you get this all filled up with a non-stretch line, that whole gob of non-stretch line won't spin on your spool. You know, another thing is some manufacturers were actually putting a little recessed notch on the spool for that purpose. You know, you would actually tie right to that recessed little hole on here. And I think a lot of the manufacturers were doing that because of the super lines, the non-stretch lines that came out, because they were actually spinning so much on here, even after they were filled up. So that's just something to keep in mind. If you don't have this, you know, little recessed notch on your spool and you are attaching a non-stretch directly to the spool, it kind of helps to put a piece of tape on it like that. And you know, another thing that happens sometimes, even if we put the line on right, even if we start off with no line twists in our line, we go out fishing and sometimes we do something to cause line twists, right? Either we're fishing with something, maybe we don't have the right hardware for it, maybe we don't have the right sinkers, maybe we don't have the right swivels to eliminate the line twists, we start developing line twists. Sometimes you can be doing everything right. Maybe you're trolling around with a crankbait, right? Crankbait should never cause any kind of line twists, right? Trolling around with that crankbait and it picks up a leaf or something, or it picks up a big pine needle, and then all of a sudden that crankbait's back there spinning and it's causing line twists. And if you're not paying attention, it can cause a lot of line twists, right? And it's happened to me many times. So, what do you do to get rid of those? Well, what I like to do, if I am out fishing and something like that does happen, where I did something to cause myself to get a lot of line twists in the line, what I'll do, take all the hardware off, just have a bare line coming off the end of the pole, and you're out in the boat, just kind of let the boat drift or maybe troll along, open the bail up, set the line down in the water, and kind of let that water grab the line and pull it off your spool. And have it take off enough, if you're casting, have it take off a cast and a half. Whatever distance you're trolling behind the boat, go at least that distance plus a little bit more. Go a little bit more than you've been doing, whether it's a cast or your trolling distance. Let that amount of line off of that spool with no hardware on it, and then again, just grab it, pinch it between your fingers, and reel it back in. And all the line twists that were in that line will just go spinning right off the end of the line, and they should be gone. I know that's worked really well for me over the years, so that's something to keep in mind. And another thing to keep in mind is to hunt, fish, laugh, repeat. This is Dave Knetter from Knetter's Practical Outdoors. Hey, thanks for watching and God bless.